June 12, 1991. The Forum, Los Angeles. 11:47 p.m.
Chicago Bulls have won their first ever NBA championship.
The scoreboard tells one story. The Chicago Bulls are NBA champions. For the first time ever. But what really happened that night can't be captured in numbers alone. For 7 long years, they mocked him as the greatest player who couldn't win when it mattered. Swept out of Boston, punished by Detroit, forced to watch Bird raise banners and Magic beam with another trophy. 7 years of brilliance without reward. 7 years of questions, doubts, whispers. Maybe he's not built to win. But then came this night. A shift in the universe. This wasn't just a championship. It was a coronation. This was the moment when Michael Jordan stopped being a man who played basketball and became something else entirely. The criticism? Buried. The doubts? Exterminated. He didn't just defeat opponents. He redefined possibility. He turned gravity into a suggestion, physics into a poem. Every move was inevitability dressed as art, and if you weren't there, you're about to see what it looks like when a player steps beyond mortality and becomes a myth. To understand the god Jordan became in 1991, you first have to understand the human he shed. At Amazing Hoops, we don't just replay highlights. We uncover the nights that changed the very fabric of basketball. The heartbreaks, the triumphs, the legends forged under the brightest lights. If you crave the drama, the history, and the moments where men turned into myths, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and take your seat courtside. Because tonight, we're reliving June 12, 1991, when Michael Jordan didn't just win his first championship, he ascended, and the game of basketball was never the same again. June 12, 1991. The Forum, Los Angeles. 11:47 p.m. The scoreboard glowed 108-101, the Chicago Bulls over the Los Angeles Lakers, and in that moment, history bent toward destiny. Michael Jordan, after 7 agonizing years of playoff heartbreak, finally stood as champion. This wasn't just a Game 5 win of the 1991 NBA Finals. It was a coronation. For so long, the whispers chased him. He can't win the big one. Swept by Boston's dynasty in the 80s. Battered and bloodied by Detroit's infamous Jordan rules. Dismissed as a scoring machine who lacked the substance of champions. Yet against Magic Johnson and the Lakers, the 5-time champions of the decade, Jordan rewrote the script. He scored 30 points, handed out 10 assists, grabbed 5 rebounds, and orchestrated a masterpiece of resilience and poise, leading Chicago to its first NBA title and closing the series 4-1. The weight of every missed opportunity lifted that night, replaced by the soaring myth that would define the 1990 season. As commentator Marv Albert famously declared, "Yes, it's over. The Bulls win the NBA championship." Those words echoed across the basketball world like a church bell announcing the dawn of a new era. Even Magic Johnson, who fought until the last possession, admitted later, "There's no question about it, he's the best player in the game." What did it mean, then, for the league when the torch passed from Showtime's brightest star to a ruthless assassin from Chicago? In truth, it meant everything. Jordan's victory wasn't just a ring, it was the death of doubt, the shattering of old narratives. He had endured the furnace of defeat and emerged untouchable, a figure who made the impossible feel inevitable. Could anyone watching that night have known what this coronation would unleash? A dynasty of 6 championships in 8 years, an icon who would become bigger than the game itself. Or was this the only night that truly mattered? The night when Jordan silenced every critic and made believers out of even his fiercest rivals. As Phil Jackson would later reflect, it was the moment when Michael's destiny crystallized. He became not just a player, but a legend. The Forum, once Magic's stage, became the scene of Jordan's ascension. And from that night forward, the NBA belonged to him. And so the question lingers, decades later, was June 12th, 1991 the greatest transformation night of any athlete's career? The night when human brilliance finally slipped into myth? 2. The mortal years. 7 years of frustration. From the moment Michael Jordan entered the league in 1984, the world knew they were watching something extraordinary. Yet for 7 long years, his brilliance seemed trapped inside a cruel paradox. He could dominate every night, but he could not win at all. In 1986, against the mighty Boston Celtics, Jordan delivered perhaps the most jaw-dropping performance of his early career, 63 points in a double overtime thriller at the Boston Garden. Still the most points ever scored in a single NBA playoff game. Larry Bird, stunned by what he had just witnessed, told reporters,
That wasn't Michael Jordan out there. It was God disguised as Michael Jordan.
And yet, despite this divine eruption, the Bulls were swept 3-0, the brilliance of one man extinguished by the collective force of a dynasty. The years that followed deepened the wound. In 1988, 1989, and 1990, Jordan ran headfirst into the wall of the Detroit Pistons, a team that had built an entire defensive system, the infamous Jordan rules, to stop him. They knocked him down, roughed him up, and forced him into elimination 3 straight years. He averaged over 35 points per game in some of those series, soaring above defenders, hitting impossible jumpers, carrying Chicago on his back. But the story never changed. Detroit advanced, and Jordan went home. While Bird was raising banners in Boston, and Magic Johnson was dazzling Los Angeles with Showtime and championships, Jordan remained the greatest player never to win. Oh, commentators echoed the whispers. Was he too selfish? Too obsessed with scoring? Too much a soloist to conduct a symphony of victory? Magic once remarked, "It takes more than talent. It takes trust, leadership, and a team." And at that time, Jordan seemed like a tragic example of that truth. But then, another question haunted the league. If he was this unstoppable without the rings, what would happen when he finally figured it out? Could anyone survive the storm if the man who scored 63 in Boston, who refused to bow to the Jordan rules, ever found the right balance of trust and firepower around him? These were the mortal years. Years of frustration and doubt, but also years that sharpened him. Years that turned a phenom into a force of nature preparing for destiny. For fans who lived it, watching him fail was almost as captivating as watching him win, because every heartbreak made the eventual breakthrough feel inevitable. Was it possible that greatness required failure first? That Jordan's mythology needed these scars before it could become immortal? The summer of 1990 was the crucible where Michael Jordan was reforged, not as the electrifying phenom who could soar over defenders, but as the avenger who could not be broken. After losing Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals to the Detroit Pistons, made more bitter by Scottie Pippen's infamous migraine that left Chicago powerless, Jordan knew that talent alone would never be enough. The Jordan rules, Detroit's brutal strategy of double teams, body checks, and relentless fouls, had exposed his body as much as his team's psyche. So he went to work. Hiring a then little-known trainer named Tim Grover, he committed to transformation. That summer, he added 15 pounds of pure muscle, not to impress with bulk, but to fight through the very walls that had confined him. "I wasn't going to let the Pistons dictate my game anymore," Jordan later said, but the change was more than physical. It was philosophical. Under Phil Jackson's guidance, the triangle offense became his new weapon, a system that required trust, patience, and a surrender of ego. For a player once accused of being a one-man show, Jordan embraced the role of conductor, orchestrating the floor with precision. By the time the 1991 finals arrived, the numbers told the story. He averaged 11.4 assists per game in that series, nearly double his career average. Proof that he had evolved into an omnipresent force. Commentator Hubie Brown once remarked, "Michael was always unstoppable, but in 1991 he became untouchable, because he made everyone around him unstoppable too." Still, entering that season, bookmakers and analysts didn't buy the narrative. Detroit, the back-to-back champions, were installed as the favorites, their mental edge presumed unbreakable. Could Chicago ever overcome the psychological grip of a team that had humiliated them 3 straight years? As Phil Jackson would later reflect,
"They're aggressive. You don't get any shot off without Detroit having something on you, a hand on the chest, a hand on your hip, even a hand on your shooting arm." And we always said that this was the team that contested more than any other team we'd ever seen on every shot. And we were able to withstand that kind of fury on defense this time around.
They are aggressive. You don't get any shot off without Detroit having something on you. A hand on the chest, a hand on your hip, even a hand on your shooting arm. And, we always said that this was the team that contested more than any other team we'd ever seen on every shot. And we were able to withstand that kind of fury on defense this time around. But when the Bulls swept the Pistons in the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals, it wasn't just revenge. It was an exorcism. Detroit walked off the court without shaking hands, a final act of defiance that only underscored how fully the power balance had shifted. What made the difference? Was it the muscle, the triangle, the unshakable mental focus forged from failure? Or was it something deeper? The inevitability of a man who had decided he would no longer be denied. The truth is that all of it coalesced in Jordan's rebirth. By the time he reached the finals against Magic and the Lakers, the league had to confront a terrifying reality. The Avenger had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. By the spring of 1991, Michael Jordan was no longer carrying the weight of Chicago alone. Around him stood a unit hardened by failure, sharpened by years of being called pretenders, and now, ready for war. Scottie Pippen, once remembered for his migraine in the crushing loss to Detroit, had grown into an all-defensive first-team force, averaging 17.8 points, 7.3 rebounds, and 6.2 assists. A versatile weapon who could smother opponents on one end and orchestrate plays on the other. Horace Grant, the relentless forward with goggles fogged from sweat, owned the glass with 8.4 rebounds per game and protected the rim with 1.6 blocks. He gave Chicago the toughness it had long lacked. Bill Cartwright brought grit in the paint, a veteran presence who could neutralize bruisers and anchor the front line when games turned into slugfests. And then there was John Paxson, the steady hand with a 54% shooting clip, a marksman whose calm stroke made him the perfect release valve when defenses collapsed on Jordan. This was no longer the Jordan and Scrubs narrative that haunted the Bulls through the late 80s. It was a championship-caliber squad, each piece aligned to complement the blazing sun at its center. Phil Jackson once said, "It wasn't just Michael who transformed, it was the whole team growing into its roles, understanding that greatness is shared." Still, skeptics wondered, could this ensemble withstand the crucible of finals basketball? The pressure of legends like Magic Johnson across the court? What made this roster different wasn't just talent, it was belief. For the first time, Chicago had balance, length on the wings, muscle inside, shooters spreading the floor, and a star willing to trust them. When Pippen rose to swat a shot, when Grant battled for a rebound, when Paxson buried a jumper, it wasn't just role players doing their job. It was proof that the Bulls had finally become whole. The odds no longer cast Jordan as a tragic hero destined to fall short, but as the leader of a machine built for the moment. Magic Johnson would later admit, they weren't just Michael anymore. They had a squad, and they were dangerous. And that's what makes this chapter so compelling. Was it destiny that Jordan needed to suffer alone first, before finding the cast that could carry him higher? Or was it simply the natural evolution of a dynasty in waiting? Either way, by 1991, the pieces were in place. The war horses assembled, and the Bulls were no longer coming to compete. They were coming to conquer. The 1990-91 season was the year Michael Jordan stepped fully into command. No longer just the league's most spectacular player, but its undisputed master. From opening night, his dominance felt inevitable. 31 points, 10 assists, and 8 rebounds, in a performance that announced the Bulls were no longer testing the waters. They were ready to drown the league. Chicago tore through opponents, finishing with a 61-21 record, the best in franchise history to that point. Powered by the league's top offensive rating and a defense that suffocated under Phil Jackson's system, Jordan himself was a force of balance and brutality, averaging 31.5 points, 6 rebounds, 5.5 assists, and 2.7 steals per game, while shooting a blistering 53.9% from the field. Absurd efficiency for a guard who often faced double and triple teams. He didn't just win the MVP, he seized it, adding a 5th straight scoring title, All-NBA First Team, and All-Defensive First Team honors. A sweep of accolades that confirmed him as both the game's greatest scorer and its fiercest defender. Michael Jordan is the only player who could control every aspect of a game without even looking like he was trying. Magic Johnson later said, and yet, despite the dominance, sportsbooks still held doubts. Detroit, the back-to-back champions who had tormented Chicago for years, entered the playoffs as slight favorites, plus 150 compared to Chicago's plus 200. A reminder that respect is not given, it is taken. But what made this season different was how Jordan's mastery elevated those around him. The triangle offense was now fully his orchestra, and he conducted it with a brilliance that made teammates like Scottie Pippen and John Paxson flourish. Their confidence is growing. With every pass he delivered at the perfect moment, could the Pistons really stop this version of Jordan? One who had transformed failure into fuel, muscle into armor, and trust into a weapon? Commentator Johnny Kerr once said, "He's the best offensive player, the best defensive player, the best competitor, and the most unselfish star I've ever seen." It was true. Jordan had entered a rare space where every possession bent to his will. Every outcome felt preordained. By the time the regular season closed, the question wasn't whether Jordan was the best player alive. It was whether he had become something more. A master who no longer played the game but commanded it. And as the playoffs loomed, another question rose. If this was his level before the ring, what monster would emerge once he finally tasted glory? The 1991 Eastern Conference Finals was not just a series, it was an execution. The long-awaited burial of the Detroit Pistons' bad boys dynasty at the hands of the man they had tormented for 3 straight years. For so long, the Pistons dictated the narrative with their brutal Jordan rules, hacking him on drives, sending waves of defenders, daring his body and will to endure. But this time, Jordan arrived forged in fire, and the Bulls dismantled Detroit with a ruthlessness that bordered on poetic justice. Game 1. Confusion reigned in the Pistons' camp as Chicago's triangle offense picked them apart. Jordan set the tone with 21 points, 11 assists, and a calm that made Detroit look suddenly mortal. Then came Game 2, the horror show. Jordan erupted for 35 points on an unimaginable 74% shooting, gliding past defenders who once battered him into frustration, turning their signature physicality into irrelevance. They used to beat him up, Charles Barkley would later say, but now he was the one beating them. Game 3 brought cold calculation. Jordan methodically dissected the defense with 33 points and 7 assists. Every possession a reminder, Chicago was no longer the student. It was the master. By Game 4, the Pistons had no answers, only pride. And when Jordan finished the sweep, averaging 29.8 points, 7 assists, and 5.3 rebounds, the humiliation was complete. But what burned deeper than the loss was the ending, the infamous walk-off. With seconds left on the clock, Isaiah Thomas and his Pistons teammates slunk off the court without shaking hands, refusing to acknowledge the man who had just conquered them. To many, it was a final act of defiance. But to history, it looked like surrender. It was the end of an era. Phil Jackson said later, they had nothing left to give and Michael had everything still to come. Analysts had picked Detroit as favorites again, leaning on their championship pedigree. But Jordan annihilated the Jordan rules and erased the psychological stranglehold in one merciless sweep. Could there be any greater symbol of ascension than slaying the very dragon that once caged you? The death of the Bad Boys was more than just a playoff result. It was a coronation ritual, and Jordan walked away not only as a victor but as the new, undisputed ruler of the East. The 1991 NBA Finals felt less like a series and more like a passing of the crown. A collision between Magic Johnson, the smiling king of the 80s, and Michael Jordan, the relentless force poised to redefine the 90s. In Game 1 at Chicago Stadium, it seemed as though experience would prevail. The Lakers, 5-time champions of the decade, stole a 93-91 victory behind Magic's orchestration. Jordan delivered a near triple-double, 36 points, 12 rebounds, 8 assists, showcasing his brilliance, but leaving lingering doubts. Could he truly outduel the man who embodied Showtime? Even Phil Jackson admitted before the series,
Michael, on Magic, although Scottie Pippen can play him too, as you know. But it does create a situation at the other end of the court, the transition defense, as we call it, that does create a mismatch, and we have to scramble to get to our man quickly.
But Game 2 provided the answer in one immortal sequence. Driving into the lane, Jordan elevated, floated, and in midair switched the ball from his right hand to his left before softly laying it in off the glass. It was more than 2 points. It was a dagger through the heart of the Lakers' spirit. A play so dazzling that even Magic could only shake his head in disbelief. When he did that, I just said to myself, this guy is going to be the greatest player to ever play the game, Magic admitted years later. The Bulls rolled to a 107-86 win, tying the series and flipping the odds overnight. Suddenly, the Lakers' experience no longer looked like an advantage, but a relic of a fading era. Jordan's aerial improvisation became a symbol, replayed endlessly, as if the league itself had witnessed the moment the torch was officially passed. Marv Albert's call still echoes. A spectacular move by Michael Jordan, but beyond the highlight, the finals told a deeper story. The Bulls' system, their balance, their hunger, was overwhelming Showtime's glamour. For years, Magic had orchestrated championships with joy and genius. But against Jordan's will, he seemed like a king fighting not just an opponent but inevitability. What must it have felt like, for fans who had grown up in the Magic and Bird era, to realize in real time that the page was turning? That Jordan was not only winning, but dismantling the foundations of what came before. The first two games embodied the tension of transition. Game 1, a reminder of Magic's greatness. Game 2, the eruption of Jordan's myth. From then on, the series belonged to Chicago. That was the moment I knew, Phil Jackson later reflected, that Michael wasn't just a great player, he was destiny in motion. The final showdown wasn't just basketball. It was legend confronting legend. And for the first time, the world saw Magic Johnson humbled by something greater than himself, a god in sneakers, seizing his throne. June 12, 1991, the Forum in Los Angeles, Game 5 of the NBA Finals, and the Chicago Bulls stood on the brink of immortality. The Lakers, proud champions of the 80s, clung to their dynasty's last breath. But Michael Jordan had already orchestrated a new era with a calm mastery that felt both inevitable and ruthless. On this night, he scored 30 points and handed out 10 assists, but it wasn't the raw scoring that defined him. It was the orchestration, the symphony of victory he conducted possession by possession. Across the series, Jordan averaged 11.4 assists per game, nearly double his career norm, a statistic that silenced forever the criticism that he was just a scorer. He learned to trust, Phil Jackson later said. And once he trusted, there was no stopping him. In Game 5, with the Bulls favored by 7 points, he did exactly what champions do, not only meeting expectations but closing with precision. Every drive into the lane opened a shooter. Every double team he drew turned into a dagger from Paxson or Pippen. Every possession a reminder that this was not just an ascension of talent but of leadership. The Lakers fought. Magic Johnson logged 16 assists, worthy of his legacy. But the tide had shifted. The Bulls' 108-101 win was less about the margin and more about the finality. When the buzzer sounded, there was no wild leap, no defiant scream. Instead, Jordan bent down, picked up the ball, and walked off the court, his face more contemplative than celebratory. As if even in that moment of triumph, he was already gazing into eternity. Marv Albert's voice carried through televisions around the world. Yes, it's over. The Bulls win the NBA championship, but what lingered wasn't just the call. It was the image of Jordan's quiet walk, a man who had conquered, but who seemed to know this was only the beginning. Magic himself, ever gracious in defeat, told reporters, "This is Michael's league now. He's the best. Could any coronation be more fitting? To dethrone the king of the 80s, to silence years of doubt, to transform from the greatest player never to win into a champion who looked destined to win forever?" Game 5 was not just an ending, it was the overture to a dynasty. The moment the Bulls became eternal, and Jordan began his reign as more than an athlete. He became a myth, and then, standing before the cameras with the Finals MVP in hand, Jordan spoke with the weight of 7 years finally lifted.
I know, first of all, I'd like to say I'm very happy to be a part of this. It's been a 7-year wait for myself, but I think from everybody on this team, no one could be more proud of the situation that we've brought to the city of Chicago than all these 12 guys here, along with the coaching staff, that we did it for the fans of Chicago and for the city of Chicago and for ourselves. Thank you.
It was not arrogance, but gratitude. His words sealed the moment, not just a victory, but a promise that Chicago's time had come. Michael Jordan's first championship in 1991 was more than a title. It was a cultural earthquake that reshaped not just basketball, but the world. His finals most valuable player numbers alone were staggering. 30. 1.2 points, 6.6 rebounds, 11.4 assists, 2.8 steals, on 55.8% shooting. Statistics that silenced any remaining critics by proving he wasn't just a scorer, but a complete force. The Bulls, in dethroning the Showtime Lakers, became the first expansion-era franchise to topple a dynasty. And in doing so, they didn't just claim a trophy. They shifted the center of gravity in sports. Commissioner David Stern would later admit, Michael didn't just save the NBA, he transformed it. Television ratings surged nearly 20% the following season, as fans around the globe tuned in not simply to watch games, but to witness a phenomenon. Air Jordan was no longer a sneaker. It was a belief system, a symbol of possibility, swagger, and excellence. Nike's gamble on a $2.5 million rookie endorsement deal in 1984 now exploded into a cultural empire, with Jordan pulling in nearly $20 million in endorsements by 1992. He was the living embodiment of basketball as global commerce. Was it possible for one man to carry not just a franchise, but an entire league into a new era of visibility and profitability? By all accounts, yes. Teammates recalled how even in the locker room after Game 5, as Jordan clutched the Larry O'Brien trophy with tears in his eyes, the weight of the moment felt larger than sport. He knew what this meant, not just for him but for basketball, Scottie Pippen later said. Magic Johnson, gracious in defeat, captured the essence when he told reporters, "It's Michael's time now. He's the best, plain and simple." And years later, Scottie Pippen would put it even more bluntly.
Michael Jordan is the greatest player to ever put on shoes and play in our game. No doubt about it.
That acknowledgement wasn't just the end of Showtime, it was the dawn of global Jordan mania. Kids in Chicago wore his number 23 jersey to school. Teenagers in Paris and Tokyo lined up for Air Jordans. And in playgrounds from New York to Manila, the dream wasn't just to play in the NBA, it was to be like Mike. The ripple effect was enormous. The NBA went from a struggling American league in the early 80s, battling low ratings and controversy, to an international juggernaut by the 90s, riding on the wings of Jordan's myth. And so, the question remains, was 1991 simply the year Jordan became a champion, or was it the year he became an idea, a cultural force that transcended basketball and defined an era? What made Michael Jordan in 1991 so terrifying wasn't simply that he could soar higher or score more. It was that every movement, every decision, every detail had been sharpened into obsession, precision, and mastery. His game no longer depended on improvisation alone. It was built on fundamentals so flawless they bordered on mechanical perfection. At the rim, he converted 67% of his shots, a testament not just to athleticism but to angles and timing. From mid-range, the zone where most players fade into inefficiency, he shot 58%. Even from long two-point range, often derided as a low percentage shot, he drilled 54%, punishing defenses who dared give him daylight. Defensively, he was equally relentless, averaging 2.7 steals per game while forcing countless turnovers through suffocating on-ball pressure and anticipation that seemed clairvoyant. Michael would beat you before you even realized what he was doing, Clyde Drexler once admitted. It was chess at 100 miles per hour. What's more, Jordan had learned to weaponize psychology. Every slight, every whisper that he couldn't win, every body check from Detroit became fuel. Every drill in practice became a duel, where even his own teammates couldn't escape the competitive fire. Phil Jackson later recalled, "If you beat him at ping pong, he'd stay up all night practicing until he could destroy you." By 1991, that obsessive edge had made him predictable. Not in the sense of being stoppable, but inevitable. He no longer chased victory, he expected it, carrying himself with the certainty of a man who knew the outcome before the tip. This season redrew basketball's hierarchy. For years, the question had been whether Jordan could climb to the level of Bird, Magic, or the dynasties that defined the 80s. Now the question was reversed. Could anyone else ever reach the level Jordan had just set? Even sportsbooks, once hesitant to anoint him, shifted dramatically. Entering 1991, Detroit still held the odds as slight favorites to repeat. But after June, for the first time in franchise history, Chicago entered the 1991-92 season as preseason championship favorites, a symbolic acknowledgement from Las Vegas that the age of doubt was over. And perhaps that was the greatest transformation of all. Michael Jordan no longer belonged to the underdog's narrative. He had transcended it, remade the league in his image, and set a standard so impossibly high that every superstar who followed would be measured against it. Was 1991 the year he became a champion, or the year he became the measuring stick for greatness itself? In the summer of 1991, when Michael Jordan lifted that first Larry O'Brien trophy, he was laying down a blueprint that would define greatness for generations. His performance in the finals, 31.2 points, 6.6 rebounds, 11.4 assists, and 2.8 steals per game on 55.8% shooting, showed that dominance wasn't about fitting into a position. It was about erasing positions altogether. He was a guard who rebounded like a forward, a scorer who distributed like a point guard, and a defender who could neutralize anyone across the floor. This was basketball reimagined, the birth of positionless dominance, a style that would later shape the games of Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and every modern wing who dared to play both ends with relentless fury. But it wasn't just the statistics, it was psychological warfare. Opponents knew, before the ball was even tipped, that Jordan would come at them with obsessive preparation, flawless footwork, and the mental edge to turn games into terror. He didn't just beat you, Patrick Ewing once said. He made you feel like you could never win. That blueprint, forged in 1991, became the ghost Kobe chased in every 5 a.m. workout, and the standard LeBron measured himself against with every trip to the finals. It became the DNA of greatness itself, and from that moment on, every dynasty was judged against Chicago. When the Bulls entered the 1992 season, sportsbooks no longer questioned whether Jordan could win. They made Chicago the overwhelming favorite, and he rewarded that faith by repeating with ruthless authority. Was that the true legacy of 1991? That immortality doesn't begin with 6 rings, but with the first one the moment the world sees you not as a player, but as the measuring stick for everyone else? Phil Jackson captured it perfectly. Michael's first championship wasn't the end of a journey. It was the start of an era. And so, the echoes began. Every trophy that followed, every banner that rose, every legend who chased him, all traced back to that first coronation in Los Angeles, the night the game changed forever. June 12, 1991, became more than just the night Michael Jordan won his first championship. It became the night the sport itself shifted. It was the burial of old doubts, the dawn of a dynasty, and the moment one man's obsession redrew the very map of greatness. From Boston's heartbreak to Detroit's torment, from Magic's throne to the Bulls' ascension, everything pointed to this coronation. But what does it mean, 3 decades later, to measure every champion against that night? Was 1991 truly the birth of basketball's modern era? Or was it simply the unveiling of a force destined to dominate no matter the time or place? And perhaps the biggest question of all, will we ever see another athlete who can step beyond brilliance, as Jordan did, and become not just a player, but a myth? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. If you like this video, don't forget to press the subscribe button and ring the bell to not miss the latest videos from Amazing Hoops. This action also motivates us to try harder. Have a nice day.